Hello everyone, my name is Dev from above, and today we'll be talking about Robert Steinhäuser, the shooter of the Gutenberg Gymnasium in Thüringen. Wow, 2 German shooters in a row, ain't that crazy? Okay, Ahmed was Austrian, but close enough. Before moving on, I'd like to say that this video is purely educational, nothing here is supposed to glamorize or excuse the actions of the perpetrators. This is all solely for research, blah blah blah. As always, we'll be talking about his life before the shooting itself, and the aftermath of the shooting. Without further ado, on to the video. Robert Steinhäuser, born at some point in 1983 to Christel and Günther Steinhäuser. He also has an older brother called Peter, who is approximately 6 years older than him. According to NTV, his parents separated at some point and he lived upstairs with his mom while his father lived downstairs with grandparents. I couldn't find on anything whether his brother lived with them still. Perhaps they were still together when he lived there. We don't know too much about his childhood, so this segment will be rather short. He had a pretty average childhood up until 5th grade. He didn't have good enough grades, so instead of going to a gymnasium, he went to a Regelschule. Now, I can tell all of my non-German viewers will probably be turning their heads and wondering, what the fuck is this guy talking about? So let me explain. In Germany, after 4th grade, depending on your grades, you can go to one of 3 types of schools. And for this segment is Schule is the German word for school, just so you know. So the first form we have is Hauptschule. This is like the worst form of school you can go to. No front to people who go there. And it's like after graduating you don't have lots of chances in the job market from what I know. The second form is Realschule. This is a pretty average form of school. You go there from grade 5 to 10. And after you graduate you can do the good amount of stuff. But stuff like college is usually off limits to people who graduate from Realschule. And third, and like this is the best option you can have, is a gymnasium. This is the school for like the best students. You can do pretty much everything when you graduate, do an apprenticeship, go to college, whatever. Regelschule is, from what I understand, a mix of Hauptschule and Realschule, but I couldn't find much on this form of school, so don't quote me at that. Anyways, back on topic. Robert went to a Regelschule trying to graduate from there, but his parents quickly transferred him to a gymnasium as soon as his grades got good enough. That gymnasium being the school he ended up committing the massacre, the Gutenberg Gymnasium. There were 2 reasons for that. One, they wanted a better future for him, to have as much doors open to him as possible. And 2, in a parent-teacher conference, Robert's teacher told his parents that his class, and the school in general, was very violent and bullying was apparently rampant. Out of fear, they obviously transferred him. Robert immediately had problems in his new school. Not necessarily out of bullying, but mostly and mainly academic reasons. It is unknown why he seemingly refused to learn, if he was just lazy, depressed, uninterested, or if he really did learn but simply wasn't made for a school form that hard. Some of his classmates said that he was, just a typical thing that everyone always says, smart but lazy, or that you could see that he really tried learning, but something along those lines, while others said he was sort of an asshole and hated school, with one of the students stating in an interview that he, Robert, just gave up in the middle of a presentation and was like, what the fuck am I reading? What is this shit? But if you ask his family, they'd say he was too busy gaming. Yeah, that's right, Robert is an epic gamer! Yeah! So yeah, he played video games. It was a big deal to his parents, due to them being boomers, and the general opinion in German media and a lot of population was that video games, especially FPS games, were training our kids to be cold-blooded killers. His parents in general disapproved of everything Robert really liked. They themselves even admitted in an interview that they didn't really even praise him on his hobbies or encouraged him. He liked building miniatures of boats and Star Trek ships, with video games, heavy metal, and upgrading his PC. He got his PC at 14 years old, and even then they had a problem with it, saying he was addicted to it and that he wasn't doing normal things a teen should be doing, like, in their opinion, going swimming or going clubbing with friends. Silly, of course, since doing PC stuff and gaming is a totally normal and valid hobby. His parents' boomerish technophobia went so far that his mom tore the cable out of his walls and devices, and his dad had some weird device installed on Robert's TV so that it turned off in an hour and he would have to pay 1 mark, which is the old German currency, before they implement the euro, for 1 hour of TV. His parents forced Robert to play handball, for example, where his teammates and trainers said that he was a pretty average player doing the bare minimum, and that he had no heart in it at all. Some flaws that Robert objectively had were his insecurities and his anger issues. He was very insecure about his appearances and was also very jealous of everything that his brother had. His insecurities also caused him to overcompensate and pretend to have a big ego. He would often pretend as if he was wise beyond his years and would tell people, including his parents, by the way, you don't know what you're talking about when discussing topics with them. His anger issues caused him to be bad at taking criticism and take no for an answer. If his parents shut his TV off, he would react violently and throw things out of frustration, breaking them in the process. A year and a half before the shooting, Robert got into shooting and joined a shooting club. Lots of shooting. He was apparently pretty good, and surprisingly, at least one member of his family praised him for it, that being his brother, even saying that he didn't believe that Robert joined the club with the intent to use the guns for the shooting, but simply because it was like one of his genuine interests. His parents, as always, were against it, saying it was too violent and would lead to vigilantism and such. When the final exams approached in school, Robert told his parents that he doesn't believe he can do it, to which they simply pushed his worries aside and told him to play through the pain, basically, and just graduate, no matter the grades at the end. He voluntarily repeated grade 11 out of his anxiety of the finals, which sadly didn't bring much. One of his teachers even told his mom when discussing the topic that there would have to be a miracle for him to pass the finals. Now, we're getting close to the end and what pushed him over the edge. So when an exam he didn't feel prepared for approached, he faked the doctor's notice so he would have more time to study, or potentially not have to do it at all. But somehow they found out and he got expelled. This was his breaking point. Now he was left with nothing. He was basically left without an education. He had no kind of school certificate, not even like the Hauptschule one or anything. The sad thing is, had he just continued going to his old school or just lived in some other state in Germany, he would have been fine. Only Thüringen, the state he lived in, was so weird about it.
Nachdem herauskam, dass Robert Steinhäuser ein ärztliches Attest fälschte, um einer wichtigen Prüfung fernbleiben zu können, wurde er von der Schule verwiesen. Sehr geehrter Robert Steinhäuser, teilte ihm die Schulleiterin schriftlich mit, hiermit beende ich das mit Ihnen bestehende Schulverhältnis auf der Grundlage des Thüringer Schulgesetzes entsprechend der durch Sie zu vertretenden Gründe mit Wirkung des heutigen Datums. Und für den Fall, dass Sie Ihre Schullaufbahn beenden wollen, wird Ihnen ein Abgangszeugnis ausgestellt. Und zur Klärung dieser persönlichen Angelegenheit beurlaube ich Sie von der Teilnahme am Unterricht bis einschließlich 9. Oktober 2001. Mit freundlichen Grüßen, Studiendirektorin Christiane Alt, Schulleiterin.
Here we can see his report card, but since it's written in German and not in numbers but in like a little word, I will just translate to whatever it will be in America, I guess. There we go. So now, my dear American viewer or anyone else who doesn't have this sort of grading system, you two know what his fucking grades were. They were fucking abysmal. Not being able to live with this, he prepared his shooting and his suicide. His parents had no idea that he dropped out, by the way, because Robert was 18 at the time, the age where you're considered an adult in Germany. He could decide himself if the school should notify his parents, and he decided against that. Probably out of shame. And out of shame, Robert would pretend to go to school for over half a year. One time his mom even asked him if he was even going to school, and he told her, "Of course I am, just call them and ask." She, in fact, did not call the school and ask. Which is crazy, by the way. Like, what would he have done if she had asked? On the 26th of April, Robert would pretend to go to school to go attend his finals. And on his way out, his dad tried hugging him and wishing him good luck, to which Robert avoided his hug and sort of ignored his dad's wishes, saying something along the lines of, "Yeah, don't worry, it'll be fine." I'm kind of wondering though if you picked the 26th of April because the finals were being written then, or if you originally wanted to do the 20th of April, you know, probably somewhat being inspired by Columbine and all. But failing to prepare for that date and then pushing it back, not like it really matters, it's just a thought. He would come back a couple of hours later when his parents had left to go grab his bag with his weapons and ammo, and like, sort of interesting enough, with a cigarette in his mouth. I mean, it's not a huge deal, it's just that he wasn't known as a smoker, therefore it's a bit weird. His grandma was still at home and saw him entering and leaving later, but in another interview his mom would state that she saw him come back and get his bag, with his excuse being that he forgot a pencil. And with that, we'll be moving on to the part where I talk about the shooting itself. On the 26th of April 2002, Robert Steinhäuser would make his way to the school to commit the massacre. Upon entering the school at circa 10:45 am, he met the janitor, asking him if the headmistress of the school, Mrs. Ault, was present, to which the janitor told him that she was not able to talk to him. After that brief conversation, he entered the men's bathroom on the ground floor and would gear up, putting on his black ski mask. I don't know if he was trying to get away after the shooting or if it was intimidation, loading his Glock 17 and putting his Massaker 590 shotgun on his back, and he stuffed his pockets full of ammo, leaving his bag with hundreds of rounds more, his father's machete and his jacket, in which the police found traces of weed and tobacco. And it's important, he was not high at the time. That's very important. He was not high. And, also he left his wallet with his ID and such still in it. At 11 am he made his way to the principal's office, passing multiple students in classrooms on his way. He then knocked/buzzed on the door for entry, and upon being let in, he immediately opened fire and killed the deputy headmistress Rosemarie Heiner. The secretary Anneliese Schwertner tries to flee, but unfortunately doesn't succeed and gets fatally shot, later dying to her injuries. After killing them, he immediately leaves, not trying to get into the headmistress's office. But she, the headmistress, almost ran into him when hearing the gunshots, but hesitated when hearing the screams of Anneliese Schwertner, only opening the door when she was sure Robert had left. Somewhat funny thing, by the way, despite having a mask on, he was already identified by multiple people as Robert when he was on his way to the secretary's office. Probably, I guess, by his build and stature. After leaving the secretary's office, he quickly proceeded to go up onto the first floor, where he immediately guns down the math and physics teacher Helmut Schwarzer, then immediately heading for room 105 and gunning down the mathematics and physics teacher Peter Wolf in front of his students. He then left the room and immediately ran into his next victim, Hans Schwertfeger, who, upon hearing the gunshots, wanted to see what was happening. When he saw Robert, he immediately put his hands up, probably think this was a hostage situation or simply because he didn't know what else to do. He was promptly shot by Steinhäuser. Here the first calls to the police start coming in. Not wasting any time, Steinhäuser proceeds up the stairs to the second floor. He checks room 206 and finds it empty, and then checks room 205, in which scared students were hiding. The students report Steinhäuser's excited gaze, which was noticeable even through his mask, and him waving a gun around. He lets off one random round, hitting some locker and then promptly leaving. Perhaps he only shot the locker to scare him for fun, or he shot on accident out of excitement and adrenaline. Anyways, he would then make his way to room 204, where two students were trying to tell the German teacher Gabriele Clement about the shooting, which she, of course, didn't quite believe in until Steinhäuser actually showed up and started waving his gun around. He first pointed his gun at the two girls but didn't shoot them, instead going after Miss Clement, who upon seeing Steinhäuser tried hiding in her classroom. He shot her 5 times from close distance. After killing Miss Clement, he enters room 211 and searches for his next victim. Upon closing a blackboard, he finds Yvonne Fulcher-Bear hiding and guns her down in front of her class. At this point, panic breaks out in the school and kids are running out of the classroom. Some want to check out what's going on, and a student tries to perform first aid on one of the victims. Meanwhile, other classrooms start setting up barricades. Steinhäuser left the classroom and checked in room 208, where he looked at a teacher, but because she was relatively young and was surrounded by young students the same height as her, he let her go, because he couldn't tell her apart from the students. He also disrupted a kid's birthday party in one of the classrooms before proceeding to the 3rd floor. He hurries to room 307 and walks past the students talking to the teacher, Heidrun Baumbach, and shoots Miss Baumbach 6 times, and then simply walks out again. He yet again walks past the teacher, well, more like a trainee teacher, but same thing. He passes and checks a couple of classrooms, but only enters room 304/310, and quickly, but notably pretty relaxed at this point, made his way to the trainee teacher Carla Pott and shot her. She collapses from the gunshots, and Steinhäuser shoots her 2 more times and then simply leaves the room. He enters room 304, and quickly after he enters, another door got opened to the classroom from classroom 303, so they were connected. Heidemarie Zicker, who was with her class, who were writing their biology finals at the time, wanted to see what the noise was all about, probably thinking it was some sort of prank, and without hesitating, Steinhäuser lifted his gun, shot her in the head, and then proceeded onward. On his way out, he goes through room 303 and then 301. He pushes aside the student who was in his way, and while walking, guns down the math and chemistry teacher Hans Lippe. On his way out, a girl asks him, "Is it normal that I can't hear?" To which Steinhäuser simply pats her shoulder as if saying, yeah, don't worry about it. He makes his way back to the second floor again, which is mostly empty. All the students and teachers had already fled at this point or barricaded themselves. Two teachers were still looking for lost students though, to get them to safety, one of them being Monika Burkhardt. Steinhäuser sees her by the door to room 201, immediately opening fire and hit her. She runs into the room and he starts chasing her. She runs to the door connecting room 201 to 202, but got shot in the back while running, making her fall through the doorway into room 202. He shoots her 2 more times while she's on the ground, steps over her, and then shoots her 1 more time before being satisfied. He goes for room 202 to the walk through room 202/3010. A teacher had previously confused with a student barricaded herself in her classroom with her students. One of the students, Ronny Mücke, tries to go outside and argues with her, but before the argument really ends, Steinhäuser is already trying to get into the classroom, and upon noticing that the door is locked, he shoots through it, shooting and killing the 15-year-old Ronny Mücke and the 14-year-old Susanne Hartung. Afterwards, he proceeds to go back down to the first floor, and besides shooting some kid's backpack for no real reason, he goes to the ground floor. He found Dr. Birgit Detke on the ground floor and chased her outside and shot her, where she collapsed between some cars. He walked up to her and shot her dead. At the same time, the first police officers arrive on scene. One police officer tries to get students who are running to him for help to go back inside, and while doing so, gets spotted by Steinhäuser, who opens fire on the police officer, and the officer responds with a single shot on him. Neither one hit the other. After this short exchange, Steinhäuser quickly ran back inside and stopped, between the stairs, his reason being that there was a window with a good view on the street where the police was situated. 2 more police officers arrive and get informed on the situation, most likely being falsely informed that Steinhäuser was still outside, and try to head to the scene. On their way, they get shot at from the window. A bullet hits Andreas Gorski, one of the officers, in the neck, upon which he collapsed and his bulletproof vest opened, as it had not yet been properly closed. Steinhäuser fires 3 more shots, hitting Andreas Gorski in the chest, killing him. He goes up again to the first floor, to room 104, where he talks to a construction apprentice who he had seen and talked to earlier already. He also surprisingly took his mask off to talk to him. The apprentice asked Steinhäuser if this was a senior prank or something like that, to which Steinhäuser simply replied that they, the school, had expelled him. He doesn't put his mask back on. He starts walking around sort of aimlessly, not even chasing or really looking for victims. We can come to this conclusion because a teacher on the end of the hall had unlocked the door and went outside for a second, saw him, and quickly ran back inside. And Steinhäuser must have noticed her, because how could he not? But he didn't give chase or shoot at her or anything. Soon he met up on the teacher Rainer Heise, who was still in the building for whatever reason. Since there are no witnesses to corroborate his story, we are more or less forced to believe his retelling of how the encounter went. Heise says that he, after opening a door, ran into Steinhäuser, whose mask was taken off, quote, by 90%, so you could basically see his face. Steinhäuser pointed his gun, mistaken by Heise as a revolver, at Heise, to which Heise said, "You can shoot me if you want," to which Steinhäuser, sort of infamously said, "Mr. Heise, that was enough for today." They stayed at each other for quite some time until Heise told him that they should talk and that it would be best for him to come inside, to which Steinhäuser seemingly agreed, going into the room with Heise. As soon as Steinhäuser turned his back to Heise, he got pushed inside the room and locked inside, with nothing else to do and nowhere else to go. Robert Steinhäuser killed himself while locked in room 111. The shooting lasted only 19 minutes, and in 19 minutes, Robert Steinhäuser managed to kill 16 people, that being 13 school faculty members, 2 students, and 1 police officer. After the massacre, 700 students and an unknown number of teachers got diagnosed with PTSD and eventually developed memory gaps and avoidance behavior. Immediately, there were rumors of 2 perpetrators, but those were quickly debunked by the police. Quickly after the tragedy, the organization Schrei nach Veränderung, translated Scream for Change, got founded, consisting of students and young adults who were openly tackling and acknowledging issues that led to tragedies like this. Things like academic pressure from parents, school society, bullying, while also criticizing the media, politicians, and the general public of how they handle such tragedies, simply shifting the blame to video games or movies, or putting the sole blame on the perpetrator, and not looking at stuff like the previously mentioned factors, for example. In general, a pretty good organization, although I couldn't find anything on them doing stuff now, so I guess they sadly and quietly disbanded after the members got too old, I guess. The media, politicians, and the general public blamed violent video games,
which was the style at the time.
That move was heavily criticized by Schrei nach Veränderung. Also, remember the teacher who locked Robert Steinhäuser in room 111, Rainer Heise? because he was a pretty infamous figure around the whole time. See, at first people heralded him as a hero, you know, he was the one who locked the shooter in a room after all. He basically saved all those people. But then people suddenly changed their opinion, saying things like, oh, had he not locked Steinhäuser in that room, the police would have gotten him to stand trial. Oh, he's lying. Oh, he's using this strategy to pretend to be a hero. Which is like, I can see it, I guess, but since he was the only witness to his own situation, we sort of have to believe him. And, you know, it's basically confirmed that he did lock Steinhäuser in that room, not anything else. You know, what else was he supposed to do even then, you know? I don't know, in my eyes he did the right thing, and trying to make him out to be a bad guy is fucking crazy. Gun laws were also made stricter, only being able to purchase guns and own guns at the age of 21, as well as certain modifications to guns. You also had to keep your gun stored, even safer if you're under 25. You had to be psychologically tested as well. Which, you know, is crazy that you didn't have to do that before. The police also got a slight reform, being allowed to storm the shooter by themselves and not have to wait for special commandos. Robert Steinhäuser's parents buried their son in an unknown place and had to move due to harassment and such. And, there's not much more to say, so as always I thank you for watching, being patient with me and being awesome. And, you know, as always, I urge you to be respectful in the comments and all discussions regarding this and other cases, since the people who died were obviously real people, and their family and friends still suffer to this day. So please keep that in mind when discussing this topic. There's nothing to glamorize here. Yeah. My next video will probably be an Eric Harris audiobook, since I did Dylan, so it's a nice, like, a filler video before I do my next one, and I will announce the real topic of the, like, real big video in, I guess at the end of the Eric Harris video. Yeah, so next video is Eric Harris audiobook, yay, hooray! Yeah, I guess there isn't much more to say. With that, I would end the video. My name is Death from Above, and I'll see you in the next video.